We both have written Buildings Romans, which, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the phrase, is a coming-of-age narrative. And they're both from marginal perspectives. So we're thinking that could be interesting to kind of generate a chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Shall we begin?
Yeah. You looking at my book? Am I first?
I think so.
Okay. I'm like, oh no, you're looking at me. Okay, so hi everybody, my name is Kai. I wrote this book. It's called What the Fireflies Knew. And I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it so that you understand the scene that I'm going to read. So, like Miah said, it's a coming of age novel. The main character, her name is Kenyatta, but mostly everybody calls her KB. And she's 10 going on 11. And the book starts when she finds her dad's body because he's passed away from a drug overdose. And right after that, her mom packs her and her sister up in a car, and they drive from Detroit, Michigan to Lansing, and they go to their grandfather's house. They don't really know this grandfather, and they think they're just going there to hang out for a little bit with their mom, but she ends up ditching them there. And so the book itself is the story of that summer of KB just trying to figure out what is going on in her life as everything is shaken up. So the scene that I'm going to read is towards the beginning of the novel. At this point, things are not going so great yet. Her grandfather is pretty grumpy, and she hasn't yet figured out how to get through his grumpy exterior. Her older sister is 14, going on 15, and as such doesn't want anything to do with her younger sister anymore. And KB's just kind of bored and lonely and annoyed. So I'm going to read a scene that I call the firefly scene. And it should take me maybe like 5 minutes, I think. For the next few days, Granddaddy and Nia don't talk much, so I don't talk much. We tiptoe around the little house like strangers, staying quiet and out of each other's way. And for once, I don't even care. I spend most of my time outside where I can be alone. At some point, I even stopped wanting to talk to Mama once I remembered how sad she's been lately. The only person I wish I could talk to is Daddy, and he's dead. Far as I care, everybody else could just be dead now too, starting with Nia and Granddaddy. What finally brings me and Granddaddy together are the fireflies. On a night quiet like whispers, I lay across the front porch reading. Nia sits on the steps, flipping through one of her grown-up magazines that she started reading last year when she left middle school for high school. A girl dressed in a bikini laughs from the cover. The one time I snuck a peek inside, I saw a quiz with the title, "Are You a Secret Bitch?" I quickly put the magazine back on Nia's desk because back then, I didn't want to know the answer to that question. I smiled to myself at the thought of using that word on Nia the other day. Guess her magazines ain't so worthless after all. Granddaddy sits in his rocking chair as usual, humming a song I never heard. I peek up at him from my book and he winks before going back to humming a little louder. I smile, then settle back into the comfort of his voice, the comfort of the moment. "Look," Granddaddy whispers after a while, breaking the reverie. "You girls see that?" Nia pops her head up, so I pop my head up. And what I see is that the whole field that used to be dark is now sprinkled with light, like flames dancing a wild routine. Nia looks for only a second, then goes back to her magazine. But not me. "What is it?" I ask. "Fireflies," Granddaddy whispers. "I ain't never seen so many all at once." It surprises me that something so small can create something so big. Every time I think I see one, know exactly where it is, the light goes out. And by the time the light comes back, it's somewhere completely different, so that the fireflies dance and disappear right before my eyes. Granddaddy says some people call them lightning bugs, but firefly sounds more magical to me. My palms itch as I think about catching one of them. I want to learn the secret of their light. I run out into the field, clasping my hands around pockets of air that once were a firefly's hiding spot. But no matter how hard I try, I can't catch a single bug. Seems like soon as I spot one, it magically disappears. I wonder what the trick is, the secret that these little bugs keep as they disappear into the dark. I run and trip through the chilly night air, waving my arms wildly. No matter how hard I try, I can't figure out their secret. I hear a chuckle behind me and turn to find Granddaddy standing there, a broad smile planted on his cracked face. The first smile he ever gave me. "Slow down," he says softly. He takes my small hands in his giant ones and slowly leads me toward a patch of light. With a silent flick of his wrist, he uses my hands to circle a firefly just before it escapes to the wind. I open my cupped hands careful, like I'm pulling a bow from one of them perfectly wrapped presents I get at church on Easter Sunday, then smile at the gift of light crawling between my thumb and forefinger. The firefly came to me. Just like that, I had the secret right in my hands, and suddenly, it ain't seemed so hard to catch. I look back to thank Granddaddy, but he's already started his slow retreat to the leaning porch. Before Daddy died, he started trying to teach me how to play cards. It was our thing, just the two of us, 'cause Mama and Mia ain't like to play. The first time we played, Daddy found an old deck of cards in our kitchen junk drawer. The deck was missing a 2 of clubs and a jack of diamonds, but Daddy used the joker cards and an ink pen to make a whole deck. He started out by teaching me the easy games like Tunk and Go Fish, but then we got to the good stuff. My favorite was Speed because I loved trying to put my cards down fast enough to beat Daddy. But no matter how fast I went, I could never beat him. Till one day Daddy whispered to me, "Want to know my secret to winning Speed?" I nodded so hard my eyes went dizzy. Daddy showed me the cards in his hand, all organized in perfect patterns. I set my cards up before I put a single one down, Daddy said, showing me how it worked. Sometimes, when you want to speed up, you gotta slow down first. I feel the gentle tug of the breeze around my arms and find myself back in the field. "Thank you," I whisper into the wind. I pretend the words are smoke, watch as they spiral up past the stars to catch a kiss from Daddy, then back down to Granddaddy, again rocking and humming in his chair, to graze the soft place on his cheek, just above the chin. I hope, when it lands there, he knows it's from me. I think back to my Anne book, how I figured Granddaddy was going to be like Marilla Cuthbert, who acted like she hated Anne when they first met. But eventually, Marilla loved Anne just as much as Matthew did, maybe even more. Granddaddy rocks and hums, rocks and hums. Maybe one day he'll come around, I wish, just like Marilla. I turn and glance across to Nia, still in her same spot. She ain't even look up from her magazine, and I feel sad for her. I bet if she had tried, she would have loved the fireflies too. Okay.
Well, first of all, I love this book. And it was even a book that some of my students read this quarter, as you know,
yes.
because 2 of my students interviewed you.
3.
Oh, 3?
Yeah.
Oh, the other one didn't tell me. I know they were so excited to find out that the author was faculty at Santa Clara.
It was very cute. They were like on the Zoom call. They were like, they kept giggling and they were just like, I was like, "Hi, I'm like, I teach at your university. Like, you could come and see me. I'm in the same building as your professor."
In fact, across the hall.
Exactly. But they were very excited, and it was sweet.
It was. They loved it as much as I did.
Thank you.
You know, it's funny. I have a story about fireflies as well because it's one of the 3 things I miss about living in California. Thunderstorms, which
you don't have to
maybe
miss.
we're summoning that over, right? But the other one of them is fireflies. I mean, we call them lightning bugs.
Yeah, of course.
And there were so many in Baltimore. And when I was a kid, I thought that they were my birthday present because I was born on the summer solstice, and that's just when the fireflies come out.
Oh my God!
So they would always come out right around the time of my birthday, and I used to think when I was a little kid, like, this is my present from God.
That's so sweet. Oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and put that in my book.
All right, speaking of Baltimore, this is American Gospel. Comes out in 3 days, but you can get it here if you want. And the novel is about a low-income neighborhood that is historical but has come upon bad times, like a lot of Baltimore. And through some backdoor dealings between politicians and developers, there's a deal to raise 64 square blocks of this historical neighborhood to build a theme park in the theme of Baltimore. So that is the backdrop. And it's told from 3 braided first-person perspectives. One of them is a history teacher at a school, a Catholic school, who is questioning his vocation in light of what's going on in the neighborhood. Then there is Peter, who I'm going to read from, who is the teenager. He's queer and unapologetically so, but we'll get to that in a moment when we talk about Buildings Romans. And then his mother, Ruth Ann, who is kind of a prickly character who is constantly running around within the city, kind of fearing her estranged husband. So some of the novel is very heavy. The cover kind of signifies that. But I'm going to be reading a section that is from Peter's perspective, the precocious 17-year-old. All you need to know is he's obsessed with one of his schoolmates, and his schoolmate is Jude. He's the, what would you call it? I guess like the greasy hipster at the Catholic school, and Peter has been obsessing over him. So this is about 2/3 of the way through the novel, and it's a moment in Mass. Anyone familiar with Catholic Mass? Yeah, you'll get, yes, unfortunately. I know everyone in San Francisco is a recovering Catholic. That's what bonds us all together. Through him, in him, with him, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all praise and glory to you, Almighty Father, forever and ever. Yeah, you know. The auditorium is packed with invisible ice devils playing hide-and-seek behind our rhythmic puffs of white breath. And despite it being an all-school mass, filling the cavern with microwaved hormones, most of us are clutching our forearms. They won't let us wear coats during service, because comfort implies disrespect, and certainly we wouldn't use each other. Boys aren't supposed to be sensible, only dignified. Men are islands, no touching. Tony is picking his nose. Paul is biting whatever is left of his nails. Jimmy is sleeping again. Almost like clockwork, the death wheeze of his snore plays Lazarus between proclamation and the creed. Someone in the row behind me farts, followed by pressed giggling. My stomach is empty. Father Mike is homilizing how it feels to be filled with the Holy Spirit while I'm only filled with methane. But none of it matters. When I saw Jude's empty seat in homeroom, I thought he had ditched again. I thought just for a moment maybe he wasn't calling me back because something serious was going on at home. They had kind of connected prior, and you know how it is. Is he going to call? Is he going to call? But I see him on the stage in the white, heavy robe that pulls his shoulders to the floor. He's holding the dented gold bowl of wafers while Father Mike lumbers through the blessing. His dyed black hair, the bruised moons under his eyes, the sharp edges of his bony shoulders, tent poles, the look of pain, wincing during prayer. Who would have thought that a Catholic schoolboy posing as an altar assistant is a staunch atheist? Must admit, it's a good cover. I want him to get over the shock of his feelings, leaving me to stew in the uncertainty. Hurry up, Jude. I want to be with you. Christ has died. Christ has risen. Christ will come again. We slog in line for the Eucharist. I'm behind Paul, who's still biting his nails. He told me last year that communion makes him nervous because he's never had the guts to reveal in confession that he once spooned peanut butter on his dick and had his dachshund Lipschitz lick it off. I don't tell him about Grant or any of the other ones, the hairy chests, the bulky middle-aged man bodies, the thick hands clutching my waist, the smell of their experience, none of it. The only thing I'd be able to confess about what I did with them is that I liked it. Jude. He looks like a stray mutt scrubbed and perfumed for a dog show. None of us feel comfortable in that robe, and me and the others have worn it many times, but there is something that looks almost right about it on him. It's not the length, nor is it the color. If it wasn't for the black underlines of his pallid features, he'd disappear into the shifting light the halos, the crucifix around him, the same light that beams in the periphery of immaculate dreams or the struggle to remember. Tony flicks my earlobe. The organ drones on solemnly, sounding more like a eulogy than a celebration. I wonder why it ever became such a chore to endure Mass. I can imagine how fun it was back in the day. John would gather everyone around a secluded seaside group of trees, the fish and bread and tossed jugs of wine all at his feet. Everyone hugs and sings. They would dance and drag their linen through the salt water, their stomachs filled with the good old blood of Christ, until they saw him, their grief-painting memory tangible. Their eyes would turn back into their heads to see the past clearly. And there he would be, standing on the beach, with his body glowing from behind, his arms outstretched. The daylight would drift below the earth, and fire would take the place of their glory. They saw the Lord again, a flame for his presence. Jude. Though he appears uncomfortable, he manages to administer the manna with remarkable conviction. He enunciates each syllable. Enunciates. I can't say that word. He enunciates each syllable. The body of Christ. With the right mix of authority and shame, and places the wafer slowly in cupped hands, in sleepy mouths. He didn't wash his hair today. It pulls against his scalp. As Jimmy cups his hands, I hear him mutter to Jude, "Nice dress." Jude doesn't even flinch. His thin jaw, skin stretched like alabaster muslin, clenches only slightly. The body of Christ. His ears are small. I wonder if that means he hears less, or picks up higher-pitched sounds. I can make higher-pitched sounds in those ears. The body of Christ. His fingers are long and hairless, unlike Grant. Grant had dark brown sausages with tufts of black hair above the knuckles. They tasted like a sharp and meaty beef bouillon. Jude's would be smooth in my mouth. They would slide in slowly and taste like meringue. The body of Christ. His fingers pick up the wafer so delicately. His wrist floats over to the waiting hands in a languid half circle that reminds me of summer heat. His voice is certain, a Doric column. And it makes sense. It's not the robe that looks good on Jude, it's the role. Standing alone, distinguished in white, haloed by light, presenting with conviction the symbol of a doctrine he doesn't follow. This whole getup, the circumstance, suggests that nothing is truly certain. A boy may lose his father to suicide, another may desire only other boys, and a non-believer may serve communion. But that is what they are given. So with our own hands, with our own voices, we fashion a response of certainty, that we will take what is given us and simply deal. So if he is willing to possess such certainty in giving, I will as well. My ears, my groin grow hot. The body of Christ. His eyes don't acknowledge me. Of course they wouldn't. This isn't the time for friendly chatting or smiles. He can't tell me why he hasn't returned my calls, avoided my eyes since Martha's prom. He can't tell me why he's made me feel like my skin is being peeled from the inside out with those fingernails by his silence. This is the body of Christ, and it is what we are given, and it demands all our attention, and we must make the enduring of it our certainty. I move towards him and open my mouth for the manna. I wonder if he will sense the warmth emanating from my lips. My tongue first grazes his thumb, and then I close my lips around it entirely, just up to the knuckle, just enough so he knows I want more than Mad Dog in the car, that I want more than peeking at his stomach when he lifts his shirt, that I want him, and to also let him know that it would feel good. It would feel so good, Jude. And then I taste him. His thumb is a sting of oil and sweat and salt. It's not meringue at all. It is merely a smoother version of sharp and meaty beef bouillon. My eyes open with his deep squeal, and just in time to watch the dented gold Eucharist bowl sail from Jude's hands, bits of light shimmering like the glint of a disco ball, and hit the red carpet with the clang, the gong of something hollow. The body of Christ spins through the air like frisbees. Jude follows with grabbing hands, silly enough to think he could catch them. I drop to the floor with him to help him collect the manna. But before I can even fully bend my knees, his face whips up and dares me. All of his features, usually so delicate, now look old, bitter, pursed into the center of his face like a sphincter. I remember where my mother slapped me last night. I stop and turn. The auditorium is corpse quiet. Hundreds of teenage boys wearing the same clothes, wearing the same wide eyes, open mouths, staring at me, staring at Jude, who is scrambling to collect the Eucharist, the robes slumped around him on the floor. What else can I do? With the wafer safely stuck to my tongue, I bring my index finger to my forehead, to my sternum, then shoulder to shoulder, and walk back to my seat. Thanks be to God. Thanks. All right.
I love that so much.
He's a character. Well, hopefully, right?
Right.
So I have a question for you to start it off.
Okay.
And then after I inquire a little bit with Kai, you all are welcome to ask questions if you want. But, so we have these debut novels.
Yeah.
But we've obviously written other books. But why do you think you started with a coming-of-age story? Why is that your first book?
I knew you were going to ask me this, so I should have been prepared. I don't know that it was a plan as much as it happened. When I started writing this book, it wasn't a book yet. It was just like it was a writing exercise in school. And I wasn't thinking of it that way, but it just kind of started happening, and then I went with it. But it feels like it makes a lot of sense. I think that KB's story feels really, it feels like, I don't know, I'm going to be cliche. It feels like the story of my heart. But it feels very dear, it feels very dear to me. And it's not my story. It's not a story about my life. The things that happened to KB did not happen to me. But she's a lot like me, I made her a lot like me, and I put her in a setting that I know. So I'm also from Detroit. I had a grandfather who lived in Lansing, who I would visit. And so there's enough of me in her that I think this story felt very familiar. Even as I was making it up, it felt very familiar. And I got to know her as a character pretty quickly. And then I just felt like I knew her, and I loved her, and I wanted to tell her story. So yeah, I don't think it was on purpose necessarily, but I'm happy that this is my first novel. Also, it's kind of intimidating having this be my first novel in some ways, because it's, I don't know. I'm like, can I write anything good again? The pressures. But yeah, so what about you? What do you think about this? Okay, so I was going to ask you a different question, but you can answer your own question if you want to, or I can ask you a different question.
Wow, I wasn't ready to answer, but I can answer it.
Okay, I was about to say, because let me tell you the question I was going to ask you.
Yeah,
because it's kind of similar, but I think one thing I'm really interested in is the different ways that you write. So you have, a couple essay collections, story collection, novel. So I'm very interested in how you make decisions around how you're going to tell a specific story. How do you know what form it's going to take? So I don't know, maybe you can mush that in with your answer.
Yeah, I could do that. Essay collections, you write essays too, and short stories. So maybe you can even kind of speak to this. Essay collections, or just essays in general, a lot of times are me processing something that I'm having either a discomfort with, or I haven't fully been able to apprehend what it is I want to understand. So it's kind of like me wrestling with ideas. They tend to come really propulsively. They're less planned. It's just kind of like a word vomit, and then I kind of pick out the corn and the carrot, and then rearrange it.
It's a great image.
So I write those more. In fact, I have another collection, I think, on the horizon. Short fiction, it usually is built on theme and a character attached. Like I see someone within the realm of a theme that I think would just be a lot of fun to explore. Or, I'll be drinking something with people and we come up with just a scenario. That happens a lot too. So I have a lot of scenarios on my phone. It's like, ooh, I would love to see a character dropped into this. With the novel, I mean, it's not true because I'm writing another novel right now that is not like this. But for this one, it's the only fiction that I've written that's super close to me. So we have similar stories. I grew up in Baltimore. I grew up in low-income Baltimore. But Peter is a fantasy version of me.
Oh,
Peter is who I was not at all.
Yes. Was there a Jude, though?
Yeah, but not a hipster Jude.
Okay.
Mine's name was Leon. And he was in my dance troupe.
Okay.
I was in a hip-hop dance troupe in high school. Yeah. But we're not going to go there because that's a therapy session. So, no, this is fantasy. He's a bold, openly queer character. He doesn't give two shits, And Baltimore in the 90s, especially in low-income Baltimore in the 90s, there's a lot of masculinity.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't have been able to happen. I was completely closeted. But, so it's kind of like my fantastical version.
You know what? I love that you said that because I said something very similar to that recently, how I think I wrote characters how I wanted things to be. I think KB is similar to me, but also is a version of me that didn't exist that I wished existed. Like, she's very vocal. She's very curious, and then she takes that to the next level and she asks a lot of questions. And then when she's like, something's unfair or she doesn't understand something, she'll keep pushing it. And that's, where me and KB diverge. I was also very curious, but if someone told me to just sit down and shut up, I would sit down and shut up. I would ask no additional questions. And I was very shy and scared. And, I think for me, I grew up experiencing a lot of trauma that I didn't understand. So then I had no way to process it because I didn't even know what was going on. And so I think when I was dreaming up KB, I was like, what if there's a character who's also experiencing a lot of trauma, but she finds a way to process and to heal? Like, what would that look like? How would she do that? And that's what I wanted to try and write.
Okay, because I was curious. Were you as kind of bold about justice as KB?
No, KB's a lot of things that I'm not, but some things that I was a bookworm. I guess I still am a bookworm. I don't know. Apparently, it's my whole life now. But as a bookworm, curious. I have an older sister, but me and her were really close, so I didn't have some of the drama that she has with her sister. Although I've only been in one fight in my entire life, and it was with my sister, like physical fight. And in this book, KB has a physical fight with her sister, and the way that I describe it is very similar to what happened with me and my sister, except they're fighting in a house after her sister gets out of the shower. Me and my sister, actually, I don't even know why I'm telling this story because it's pretty embarrassing, but we were in college and we got in this fight because she still thought I was a kid, and I'm like, I'm a little less than 2 years younger than her. And we got a sublet over the summer. We lived together and she was like trying to tell me what to do in this sublet that I paid equal rent for. So I was like, hey, I'm a grown up now. You can't tell me what to do. And she was like, okay, sure you are. And so she was like being so mean to me and she kept telling me what to do. And so then one day I just got so fed up and we were like in a car. She was driving and then I just started fighting her. I just like...
As an adult.
While she was driving. And then she just like stopped the car in the road. She just stopped. She just put the car in park and she just started beating me up. And I was like just sitting there like... this is a bad idea. Anyways, we never fought again, and everything has been wonderful ever since. So I love my sister.
Wow, you got that out as an adult, though. I was thinking that you were about to tell a story of, like, you're 12. You know?
I mean, adult, I don't know. What's adult? We were talking in a class about how coming of age can really be like any point in your life because we're continually coming of age. But I think I was about 18 at that point. So I still felt pretty young. Young enough to start fighting my sister in a car while she was driving.
So if we both have these kind of like fantastical versions of ourselves, what do you think KB satisfies in you by writing her?
That's a good question. I think a big part of it is like imagining the possibilities of what could be. So it's not even just necessarily about her character, but like, for example, there's a lot of mental health stuff in this book. And that's something I wished was like something I could have talked about when I was that age. Both because I knew that, so I didn't know I had anxiety because I didn't have any language for it. But some of my earliest memories of myself, I was anxious, right? I remember my uncles would always tell me this story about how I was so easy to babysit because whenever my mom would leave, I would go to the window and I would just watch out the window the entire time she was gone. I would not do anything else. And I remember at that age, what I was thinking. I was looking out the window and I was always thinking that like she had died or she was in jail or she was, whatever thing I thought of. But I wasn't just like a regular kid who was just like bopping around, having fun. I was always very concerned about all these things that might have happened and I was super anxious, but I didn't know that. And so I couldn't do anything with it. And there were people in my family who were dealing with really serious mental health issues and no one would talk about it. It was just like brushed under the rug. It was very taboo subject. It's like in my family, in my community in general, it's like, that's not a thing for us. We're not depressed. That doesn't happen to us. We got to go to church or you got to pray or you got to whatever. And so that was really hard for me growing up because I was made to believe that like something was wrong with me as opposed to the fact that like, oh, here's like language around this thing that you're dealing with and you can navigate these things and here's how. So I think I was doing a little bit of like revisionist history and trying to think of a family who, I don't know, you said something about like how your character like at that time in Baltimore, it probably wouldn't have happened like that. And I think I wrote things that like probably wouldn't have happened that way, right? Because this is set in the 90s and this is this Black family in the 90s. And I've written them to be like almost like open to the notion of like mental health. And they're like talking about it and, being very open about it. And I don't think it would have happened that way. I know it did in my experience, and a lot of people that I talked to in similar experiences say it didn't happen that way. But I was like, it can happen that way in my book. So I don't know. I think that's one of the things that I've most gotten out of it is writing a character and giving her tools that I didn't have and watching her heal. I think I have healed some of my own shit, honestly. And I also think that I had been grieving, things like my grandfather passed away. It's the very first loss that I experienced was my grandfather. And, creating a character in this book that was very similar to him, I think made me feel close to him for the first time since I was 15 when he passed away, right? My dad passed away when I was in college in a completely different situation. But, again, writing about a dad passing away helped me to grieve because I don't think I had. Honestly, for years after my dad passed away, I just avoided talking about him completely. I was like, no one could bring him up around me. And then writing this book, I had to be in that moment again. So I think I wrote this book to probably heal myself, honestly, but it seems like people like it too. So it all works out in the end.
Well, in fact, the students of mine who read the book, one of the things they really glommed onto, I was glomming onto the circumstances, KB's kind of disruptive, childhood, but they really focused on this idea of mental health. And 3 of them wound up writing research papers that were inspired by the book. And in all three of them, it had to do with like youth voice and voicing mental health issues. So, I mean, obviously you're hitting your audience.
That's awesome.
I know. I just finished reading Tiff's essay.
Yeah.
Did she interview you as well?
I don't remember all their names.
Yeah.
Tiff is maybe, does she have glasses?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. She was one of them.
Yeah. She in particular, I mean, just did kind of a 180 in her treatment of the essay. And, you know, she was inspired by this character to kind of, because the character is so kind of perspicuous and clear and open and questioning and forthright about her questioning, that she felt like she was kind of like an emblem for the way the next generation needs to be politically. So, wow. There you go.
That's really cool.
I know. I think that's real cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if anybody has any questions yet. Okay, great. I'm going to jump ahead. If you have questions, though, just let us know, because we can definitely do that as well. I'm really interested to hear you talk about characters, like how you make characters. I'm really interested in, so you're writing a novel through, kind of, what did you call it? Braided, what's the word you use?
Braided point of view.
Braided point of view, which is really cool to me. It's something that I want to do but have not been brave enough to try yet, especially 3 different first person perspectives. I think is something that's really hard to do. So I don't know, maybe if you would be willing to talk a little bit about how you feel like you were able to come to understand the voice of each of these characters well enough to make them distinct, and like just in general, how do you go about creating characters? And I think you said something earlier too about with your short stories that you're kind of thinking about like a theme or something that you want to kind of get across. And so I'm curious if in the novel, if you're also thinking about how you want the characters to function when you're creating them.
Yeah, not at all. Not for
great.
This one. I don't know how they're going to be.
That's great.
Yeah. I think I built the situation around them first.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is the characters were created because they were all these like fantastical versions of individuals that I had met. And I wanted to create redemptions. I didn't realize that at the time, but I wanted to have redemptions for each of the characters. So, mine being, an unapologetically queer figure. For the mother character I'm not going to give anything away, but to do something that she would have wanted to do in real life.
Yeah.
And then even for the history teacher, who is kind of like a composite of individuals who just kind of represent the citizenship of Baltimore, to fulfill a destiny that they could have had. Whereas there's a lot of ineptitude in Baltimore. There's a lot of corruption in Baltimore. So I only basically saw people adhering to that corruption growing up. So this was kind of like, I want to create an activist, you know? So I think that's what I did with those. But I didn't even know what the circumstance was going to be. I was just kind of building the fantasy first. But the first person voice comes from writing theatrical work. And I'm trained in anthropological ethnography. So it's like doing reflexive interview kind of stuff. It's one of my heroes is Anna DeVere Smith, if anyone's familiar. She did like Twilight Los Angeles about the 92 LA riots. And she interviewed all these people using ethnographic techniques, and then she embodies them into performance. So she actually plays all of the characters. And when I was coming into college and I discovered anthropology, I was like obsessed. And then I went to CalArts for grad school, and I got to work with Susan Laurie Parks, who does ethnographic work as well. Yeah, exactly. I hear the like moans, because she's amazing. And it was right before or after she got the Pulitzer and then took off. But I got to train in that kind of process, so it was really natural for me to want to adopt it into the book. It was kind of like nerding out.
Yeah. I love that. So this book is first person, and when I was in grad school and I was workshopping the book, one of the things people kept saying to me was like, "Oh, switch it to third, get it out of first person." And I was like, "Why?" I think for me it was pretty deliberate. I wanted it to be first person because for this book, I wanted the entire world to be seen through KB's eyes. I didn't want the reader to know anything she didn't know. And a big part of what I wanted to do is try to highlight, the Black girlhood experience. And I felt what better way than to immerse someone completely in that. So I love first person, but I have people who will come to me and be like, I don't read first person novels.
Wait, so why did they suggest you move it to third? What was their rationale?
Well, it was that and the present tense. So I have both. It's first person, present tense. Yeah, and people were like, "Oh, it's I don't know." Everyone was just some of my mentors were telling me that first of all, there are readers who don't like it and it throws them off, and people are more used to third person. People are people have gotten used to this kind of weird past tense that we use that's actually a present tense. And honestly, it was a voice issue because everything is in my character's voice. And, some people thought that was going to be difficult for readers to understand. And, I think for me, it was just like, well, I don't think it's going to be difficult to understand in the ways that y'all are thinking that it's going to be. I think when I write stuff, there might be things that I include in a story that are coded for a certain audience, right? Okay, these people are going to know what I'm talking about, right? But it doesn't mean that everybody who reads it isn't going to be able to follow along. Everybody's going to follow along. Some people are going to get an extra layer of meaning, which I think is super important because when I was growing up, I didn't get to read a lot of stuff that felt like there was anything in it for me. I could tell that there were little mentions of things that were supposed to bring up some kind of reaction for me, but I didn't know what they were. So I was like, okay, I don't get that reference. I don't know what that's alluding to. And so I think even those things that we decide to put and the ways that we decide to use voice are really important. But, I love Zora Neale Hurston, who does, a lot of similar work. And my character reads Their Eyes Were Watching God at some point of the novel. And when I read that book, it was, really interesting to me. And I was younger, but it was interesting to me because I was hearing from a lot of people who were not able to latch onto this voice or understand this voice. And for me, I could read it like a breeze. I was just like, oh yeah, this is easy to read. So I don't know. I think I wanted to bring a little bit of that into what I was doing. I just wanted to just be authentic to an experience, and whatever that means for the people who are reading it, I don't know. I hope people like it.
Hurston is one of my influences for this, so that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, particularly the way that voice is captured, right? And and not just a lot of times she's given a lot of nods for dialect or what have you, but it's more than that. It's the way the worldview expands and contracts depending on the emotionality of the character. Have you all read that? Their Eyes Are Watching God? Oh, okay. But check. But I'm sure they have a copy here. It's amazing. Yeah, character perspective is incredible. Yeah. So that would definitely be one of the influences, for sure. Shall we open it to you all?
What questions do y'all have? Just me and Miah are just up here just chit-chatting. Yeah.
You just both mentioned that Thurston was an inspiration or kind of a background. Coming-of-age novels are so popular, and you read a lot of them in high school. And I'm wondering if there are any that you were actively working against or thought, I don't want mine to be like this. Just because I feel like I read a lot of those growing up, and just curious if there were any that struck you as that's not what I'm doing, I want to do the opposite.
Yeah, I can answer that easily.
Go ahead.
My character is not struggling with coming out. It's it's a queer character where it's not centered around the torture of coming out. I had never read a single coming of age queer story that did not have that as the center. Mm-hmm. And in fact, just a bitch for a second, this book took forever to find a home because I'll never forget, I'm not going to mention his name, this agent. Uh-oh. No, it's okay. Very nice guy. But he was like, I really like your novel. Funny enough, he also wanted me to change it on to third.
Oh, wow.
He was like, you rewrite it in third person. But then he was like, but we really need a coming out story. We need, and I'll never forget, because this is one of the reasons why I founded Foglifter. Because he said to me verbatim, we need to make this more legible to a reader audience.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember listening to that, because unfortunately I'm not witty and I don't think about retorts right away. But I remember maybe later that evening or the next day or something, asking the question, legible to whom?
Yeah.
Yeah. He wants me to write it for a straight audience because they understand what a coming out story is.
Yeah.
But it's pardon my French, fuck that. There are plenty of queer kids now who are more worried about other things. I mean, this kid is living in low-income Baltimore, and, his mother's second husband is chasing them around the city. He's not thinking about his sexuality in that way. In fact, he's very confident. He is even sexually active, in a way that is not apologetic. It's not full of shame. And I just wanted to see a gay kid that wasn't shameful of their sexuality. I just really wanted to see that. So, yeah. I mean, I'm a little late to the game because no one would take the book forever.
But you're right on time.
It's still not out there that much, honestly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I was thinking about anything specific that I wanted to write against. I just thought we needed more perspectives. I don't know. I think a lot of coming of age, so some the genre itself, it actually comes from it's based around European males. And so a lot of coming of age stories are based in that. It even took a long time for coming of age stories to begin to feature women. And then for there to be this shift of oh, what's different for women when they're coming of age than men? I guess you all probably have some unique considerations, maybe? I don't know. And so the same thing happened when Black writers began to write coming of age, because there's this whole formula, right? Which I'm not gonna be a professor tonight, but there's this whole formula around coming of age and all these things that are supposed to happen and the ways that a character is supposed to develop from whatever this point is to they have come of age, right? There's all these different things. But when you have a character who, for example, a Black character who maybe is dealing with, just like you were saying, dealing with all kinds of other things besides this one thing, right? Maybe in my life, I'm also experiencing racism. Maybe I'm also experiencing, poverty. Maybe I'm also experiencing trauma. All these other things that could be going on that are going to stop me from coming of age in this same linear fashion. There are all these other things that are going to happen in my experience for me to get from point A to point B. So I think I just really was wanting to show another perspective of coming of age, and also just say this is a normal experience, because I think for me, when I was growing up, I didn't read fiction that had Black main characters. If I read a book and it had Black main characters, they were enslaved or they were incarcerated. And that was it. And, so for me growing up, I felt like I didn't see just Black kids doing normal things in books, or not really on TV too often. And so I therefore felt like something was wrong with my family, my experience, because I was wow, we're dealing with a lot of weird stuff, and I don't see it in books, I don't see it on these shows. So I think it's just us. I think we're the only people that are dealing with this stuff, and that made me feel really awful. And so I was I just want to write something to show that all these things are just regular things, right? And it's interesting to me how many people tell me that they relate to what my character is going through, and they're not just Black people. Because that's the other thing is, So I got my book was published by someone named Phoebe Robinson, who is a comedian and an actress and a writer. And when she was first trying to get her book published, she was told from people in the publishing industry that her book was too niche, that it wasn't going to sell because it was about Black women. And they were like, no one's going to read stuff about Black women except Black women. And it was like, what? Why would that be true? Right? I read from every perspective. I read things about people who are not like me more often than now that's not true. But back then I read things about people who were not like me more often than I read about things from people who were like me. And I still always managed to see myself in those things that I was reading. And people come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm just like KB. Oh my gosh, I see myself in this. Oh my gosh, this reminds me so much of my own experience. And they're representing a million different identities, So I think I just wanted to highlight that. Like, all of these stories are coming of age stories, and it's important for us to see all of the different perspectives.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'm like, it's 8:15. I don't know.
Yeah.
One more question?
One more question?
Who wants to have the golden last question? It's a lot of pressure. It's got to be a good one.
So just from a craft standpoint, just out of curiosity, when you're writing something that's so close to home in terms of your basis for what you're creating, and speaking to that place of being able to connect even if you're not from that place, are there stopgaps that you put in place or checks and balances that you have to kind of put a line in the sand between how much of this is therapy and how much is actually serving the novel? Like, do you struggle with, is this indulgent or is this actually serving my piece? I'm just curious about that.
It's a great question.
That is a great question.
Yeah. Edit. Yeah, I actually asked that question. You said indulgent, and I immediately go to that question whenever I'm writing a passage. Mm-hmm. Is this indulgence? Is it serving the narrative? Is it serving the narrative? I mean, if we went for the indulgence, this book would be a hell of a lot thicker. Because, I got into some things, especially, the fantasy of all these characters. So, yeah, gosh, this was probably like 900 pages of writing, that at any given time where I would indulge and then take away, indulge and then take away. Because I had to ask myself, is it serving the purpose, for the trajectory of the novel? Yeah, that's the word, indulgence.
Yeah, I would also say editing, and other people were able to point out to me when I was doing it, like, okay, girl, pull back. You're going on and on. But you know what? I don't feel like any word's ever wasted. So I'm happy about everything I wrote. I am also a word hoarder. So I keep all those words and I have a document for them and they just still live, and it's funny because I'm like, what am I keeping them for? When am I gonna open up this old document and do something with these words? But it feels so wasteful to just throw them away, like I worked really hard on them. So they just live in that little file. But yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest things that was super helpful was just the perspective of other people. And it wasn't even just people who, like once I got an agent or, had an editor, it was even just, when I was in grad school and people were reading it in workshop, or honestly, my first readers were people who I didn't know. It was like people on the internet, who were like also writers who I just like met on Twitter or something. And then we'd be like, hey, I'm writing a thing. Do you want to read it? And they'd be like, yeah, I want to read it. And so then we just like read each other's stuff and give each other feedback. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wow, I'm glad they didn't like steal my work because that was kind of reckless. But it was just really helpful because they could see things that I couldn't see. But yeah, I think, honestly, I think with this book, I wasn't super indulgent because I was always reminding myself, KB would not stop to think about that, And so that was the main thing that helped, is that she's so young. Writing from her perspective, I had to cut so much stuff that I would notice and just think to myself, like, what would she notice if she just like walked into this situation what's going to stand out to her. That's all I'm going to describe. So it was also, once I got to know my character's voice better, it was a little bit easier for me to manage.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks, Kai, for joining me.
Thank you, Miah.
Yeah, we just saw each other.
And thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Especially felled trees and wind and
yes,
calamity.
thank you for braving the elements. And thank you, Kai.
Yeah, thanks, Kai.
Can we give one more hand to Miah Jeffra and Thank you both for joining us and for sharing your time and talent. We super appreciate it. Thank you all again for braving the elements. We appreciate you. We have copies of both of our authors' books at the front register. You can find them there. You can come back here and have them sign them. We also have other books if you want to take a look at them. Please make yourselves comfortable, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Support Green Apple.